Hey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I've got a story for you. Can I start with a story?
Oh, please, go.
Alrighty. So I've just been up in Auckland we had a long weekend here. So Monday was a holiday. So 3-day weekend and a few other things happened. So last week I decided to go up to Auckland, which is the biggest city in New Zealand. I flew up on Tuesday morning. So yeah, I was basically there for 6 days. And it was really cool, man. Like it's the biggest city, and it's quite a different vibe from Wellington. It's a lot more commercial. It reminds me of like some little slice of Hong Kong's just been taken out and like put in the North Island of New Zealand. But anyway, I sort of reflecting a little bit on what we talked about last time. There's 3 Ps, if you remember: people, place, passion. The thing that kind of, this heuristic that I've been working on that kind of helps me answer questions that I don't know the answer to just yet, but to find the answer. And I was like, okay, well, shit, I had this offer to go meet with a gallery actually in Auckland. And I was like, well, shit, it's about time that I go up there. So I booked the tickets and I was like, okay, let's be smart about this. One option was to say, grab Airbnb, just go and stay in a random place. And looking back, the options were pretty limited, obviously, with COVID right now. It's a little bit hard to, there's not really the same market for, short-term accommodation as there once was. So it's changed a little bit. So I was like, okay, I could do that. I know I could find a good spot. But, what would be more better is, look, let's stay with someone that's up there. So I reached out to a friend of mine. I was like, hey, what are you up to? Can I come sleep on your couch? And he was like, yeah, well, actually, him and his partner were going to be away for the whole time. So he was like, man, you could just use our place. And it ended up being on Wellesley Street, which is like, pretty much in the smack middle of Auckland Central, right underneath the Sky Tower. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And straight away, that was like the beginning of an excellent trip. So we had like one evening together. We had some dinner and that, but him and his partner shot up north, up to Dargaville in Northland for the whole time. So I was stuck there sort of feeding the cat and watering the plants and enjoying the view. But straight away, it kind of validated what we were talking about just last time about that, people in place. Because, I could have gone and just got the Airbnb and done the thing. And I know the outcome that would lead to. I don't think anyone's kidding themselves when they think they're doing an Airbnb that they're going to meet anybody. At this point in the game, it's basically, you're just paying money for somewhere to stay, right? So I was like, okay, I stay with this guy. And then all of these other things eventuated, which I will get to. But that first little piece of the puzzle was like kind of the ignition switch for this excellent trip that I had. So I went up there, took all my gear up. It's quite warm at the moment. Auckland's like kind of subtropical, really, humid, sort of evenings are coolish, but it's still quite humid. And I was like, okay, let's begin wandering. I had all my gear. It's a big place, man. It's you got to have a car, but I made it work. I like walking places, so I managed to walk in a few different directions, and I got to explore. I did the Great Wander, the archetypal derived wander down, through Auckland and some of the suburbs, and I got some amazing photography. I've sent you a few little snapshots.
Yeah, they look beautiful.
Thank you. It was really beautiful, and just the kind of houses they have up there. Auckland's always been the richest city, the wealthiest city in New Zealand by far. Wellington has this own. It's basically built on the hills from a piece of legislation. So there was never really any resources or reason for the city to be here. But with Auckland, it was the original trading port. It was where everything happened back in the day. And so you see that in the architecture of the period, architecture that just isn't anywhere else in the country, with these kind of really ornate, beautiful late 19th century villas and old houses and things. And I was just really getting into it, the way they built them, the detail they put into these buildings. But a lot of them now, they've been painted up and they've been done up, but then every so often you find one that's just a little bit run down. And I was, walking around in the nighttime trying to really capture the essence of it. And under this kind of humid heat, which I think in a way it kind of plays a role, having that heat in the work. But anyway, I'm going off on a bit of tangent here. But I went on all these little journeys, and I was walking around for hours, taking photos in Auckland. And I just realized, this is what I needed to do. I really needed to come up here. And Obviously, I'm back now, but I went up there, and it all started with this kind of idea that, okay, go meet this gallery, and I could have just done a phone call, I could have just sort of done the Zoom or whatever, but I was like, all right, I'll go up there. I had a few other people I was meeting with, and actually my other friend was like, hey, I'll come pick you up from the airport. And so we hung out for the first half of the day before we went to the other guy's place, and we were chatting, and we went down to the Chinatown, and we had these noodles, and it all just sort of came together. And really I guess the point of it all was like it all started with this motion, this idea of, right, let's go to the place, let's meet the people. And the passion kind of came from that. So you only need, out of those 3 Ps, you only kind of need 2, and then the other one will happen, right? You can have people in place and the passion will happen, or you can have people and passion and the place will just manifest. So it was really quite fascinating. And I found this little, Auckland's a really fascinating place. As I said, it's kind of like, this slice of like Yamate or some part of Hong Kong or something, just kind of lifted up and put into New Zealand. And especially in central Auckland, it's very globalized. It's, Queen Street, the main street in New Zealand. It's, half of it's like Louis Vuitton, Gucci shops, really international, high-end fashion, kind of not really my world, right? I'm kind of looking and I'm like, wow, a little bit kind of like the Ginza strip in Tokyo, a little bit narrower, but still very, very beautiful, ornate buildings, and a lot of kind of very international stuff. So there's these like Chinese restaurants and different things happening, which, a little bit more local in other parts of New Zealand, but up there, man, it's just like the sort of thing where it's like, yeah, man, this is kind of deja vu for, some nighttime city that I've been in my previous life,
In Asia.
In Asia, man. It was quite cool. It was like a mini drive, basically. And I ended up in High Street, which is like one street over from Queen Street, in this like Korean cafe thing. And it was like super kawaii. And I was just in the corner. I was like, man, this has got, they had some iced latte. It was super hot outside. And I just set up my computer, and I was doing some writing, working on the latest magazine, which is, coming together. It's looking really good at the moment. But I've been there previously, and it's like my favorite little spot because it's on the second floor. You can look out the window and you can sort of see all the people walking by, and it's literally like the kind of little cafe that you would find in Tokyo Central somewhere, where you've got a little table and you can just stay there and do whatever you want, and no one really comes in and bothers you, especially when you're up on that second floor. And it was so, I don't know, it was just so beautiful. It was like a nostalgia that I haven't had for years, which is cool, man. So that happened, and then this couple sat down next to me, and I am getting to a point here. This couple sat down next to me, and they were, I don't know, man, they were young. I don't know, maybe 20, something like that. And I had my headphones on, listening to some classic SJF, and and they started chatting, and just the energy they had, I don't know how to describe it, but there was this like kind of beautiful naivety about it, like. It seemed like maybe it was the first time they'd ever met, and I wasn't really trying to eavesdrop, but it just sort of happened to slip in. But I could just hear them chatting and sort of getting through and stumbling through the kind of the first questions you have on a first date, that sort of thing. But the way they did it, it really energized me. I was like, man, basically, there's these kind of these beautiful youthful creatures just sort of having this beautiful moment, which for you and me, man, that's like, back in the old days, right? But for these guys, it was just here.
10 years ago.
Yeah, man, once upon a time in America. But, these guys had it, and it was just infecting me, and it was like, man, that's the passion, like, I literally, I was doing some writing, just finishing up this one story I'm working on before I go to print with Wanderer 9. And it was like, man, that's what I needed. And so I was kind of like half listening and trying to do work, but the work I was trying to do was actually really, it was quite good. It was coming out, I wasn't like I was distracted. And it came together, and they stayed there for like 2 hours the whole time I was there until my battery ran out on my computer. And I was thinking, man, that's the passion, So we had the people, the place, and the passion all kind of came together, but it wasn't planned as such, It just sort of manifested itself, and in a way, that's kind of fate working to happen. And none of that would have happened if I hadn't thought, well, shit, I'll go and I'll hang out with, I'll go up to Auckland. Firstly, secondly, I'll hang out with my friend. Thirdly, I'll go wandering and trying to just go places. And all of that just sort of, drilled this like hole and dripped this inspiration down into my skull. And I was like, this is it. This is what I came for. This is what I've been looking for. And it was beautiful, man. And I flew back yesterday, and I've just been sort of reflecting on it, writing a few notes, and feeling overall really energized about the whole thing. And Yeah, so that's my little story for you. Does that make sense?
That was fantastic. That was amazing. And I think, what you did is you just opened yourself up to the universe.
Yeah.
You sort of, you didn't close yourself off by going to an Airbnb and sort of just working on a desk for the days that you were there.
Yeah.
You just sort of open yourself up. Okay, I'm going to go stay with my friend. I'm going to go to late night cafes, walk around. It's really great. A lot of good things happen when you sort of open yourself up to these chance encounters.
Yeah,
I love that story.
Yeah, no, thank you. And interesting though, like the Friday night was pretty busy, but Saturday and Sunday, just because it was a long weekend, a lot of people got out of town, and I was sort of wandering around on those nights as well. And in a way, it is funny because you kind of, when you're looking for it, it doesn't come. And so I was just kind of, really meandering by myself. And I didn't really have a problem with that because, all of the bars and stuff were closed and all the cafes were closed on the weekend. And because, everyone was sort of away. And it was kind of okay as well, like during the weekday, the week there was a few more things happening. But even when there's no one around, you can still sort of wander and kind of feel the vibes. And especially with the suburban stuff, because I got a little bit out of the city and I was, following some of these old suburbs and things. And, even then, you feel this inspiration and it's like, yeah, this is it, so you have that balance between kind of alone time and then, people time and sort of, it all sort of feeds into itself. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed earlier when you were talking is that, and one thing I noticed quite often is that you're quite knowledgeable about the cities that you visit. So when you spend time in Bangkok or you spend time in Shanghai, Hong Kong, you sort of know quite a bit about the architecture or the culture or the scene that's happening in the city.
Yeah.
And even earlier when you were talking about Auckland, you're talking about the architecture of the buildings. You're quite knowledgeable on these subjects. And I wonder, how do you find out this information? Do you visit a city first and then research about it? Or do you research about the city first and then visit? Which order does this happen in?
It's interesting. There's actually a couple of different things happening. So number one is I don't do a hell of a lot of research before I go to a place. I like to go there and sort of experience it firsthand. But I really value stories about places. And I was really lucky while I was up in Auckland, I got to meet a guy who I'd actually met previously in Wellington just a couple of weeks ago. Murray Cammick, who's quite a well-known music producer in New Zealand from sort of the 70s and 80s, I want to say. So he's, he was working back in the time when Bob Marley first came to New Zealand, or the only time Bob Marley came to New Zealand. So he was involved with that tour, and he photographed Bob Marley. And he was part of Wildside Studios, who did a lot of early work in New Zealand. For record producing and stuff. And I got to know him, and we actually met up for a coffee just down the road from where I was staying. And we just started chatting, and, instantly we really clicked. And he's such an incredible guy. And, he was like, oh, what are you up to this afternoon, Cody? And I was like, well, I haven't really got any plans. And he's like, well, look, I'll show you around. And we ended up going for this drive, and we firstly started off walking around because it was quite central in Elliott Street in Auckland, and so we walked around and he showed me a few galleries and things, and we were just chatting about the old days and just sort of his story, and it was really interesting. He was involved with the music scene in Auckland back in the day. And he'd seen the city change because, really today it's a uber, globalized city. It's basically copy paste anywhere else, but back in the day, it still had this kind of edge to it, which it's kind of lost in a way. But he showed me around and he was telling me sort of the stories of the old days and the old clubs and the old sort of scene that they had in Auckland. And I actually met him at his exhibition in Wellington, which was called Flashcars, which was like photography from the 1970s of Queen Street in Auckland, where, kids would kind of come in with these done-up cars and, just hang out because there's nothing else to do. And those photos, really iconic, because it was sort of in the bad old days of Auckland's history in a way. And so there's these young kids sort of standing around with these American kind of hot rods and just kind of done-up cars with nowhere else to go. And so he was involved in that period, and he's now in the city today as well. So he's kind of seen it all, and he was just giving me all of these ideas and histories of places. And he'd point out, he's like, oh, I went to I was DJing in here once, or was part of a show in this building once, and now it's just like a coffee shop or something, but it used to be some kind of underground place, So Murray really gave me this like insight into what was going on. And then we went for this big drive. So that was just walking around the city. And then he took me in his car for a drive around some of the old suburbs and stuff, because I was like, oh man, I'm really interested in old houses, and he was like, oh man, I've got, because, Auckland, I think it's got to be one of the highest, more quickest rising housing prices in the world, or something stupid like that. Just every month the average price is going up for houses, and it's basically unaffordable for most people. So there's this really interesting scenario where you had these 30, 40 years ago, you had these basically drugged in, run down, 19th century villas that, had like 7 people living in them. Today, they're like $2 million plots of land with like a rich couple or something, and so there's been this like massive shift in the culture, and it's all related to kind of housing and stuff. But anyway, I was like, oh man, I'm really interested in old places and what they mean, all of this. And he took me to Parnell, which is this like uber rich suburb. It's probably literally the richest suburb in New Zealand. And there's these 2 houses that are like just hidden away, and they're just so fucking run down. And that was it, man. That's what I came for. So I went back. He showed me that spot, and then I went back there and shot it at night. And it's unbelievable. I don't think you could show those photos to anyone and be like, this is Auckland, because it doesn't look like the done up, my mansion kind of thing that everyone has. And it was like, that's what I came for. And we were just chatting about it, and he showed me some places, some houses he knew, because up in Parnell is where Bob Marley was staying apparently. And he was like, oh, this is the park where Bob Marley was playing soccer. And he asked me if I wanted to play soccer, but I couldn't play. So I just sat around on the sidelines. And then there's these other, there's the big house, which is this, apparently this house that the band members used to hang out in back in the day. And all of these like little, stories and tidbits, which I was like, man, I was just like putting that into the memory banks, man. Like, I was like, this is the story, like just keep talking, like let me listen, trying to write it down as well. But it was so fascinating. And because you don't see that, like if all you see is the building, painted up, done up, clean, white picket fence and mowed garden. It's like, man, that's mowed lawn. Sorry, you don't take a lawnmower to the garden, but you see what he's trying to say. There's this history behind the layers of the paint, and so listening to that really got me started on the idea. Right, I was like, okay, what else is there? And then starting to talk to other people, and trying to connect the dots. Doing my own wandering. I found some really cool resources online, like just showing some old maps. I'm a big fan of maps, like looking at before and after, like aerial photography, because they built these motorways, through Auckland, and it just basically demolished these whole suburbs. And so finding photos from the 60s or 50s and 60s from before they built it, and trying to find and trace kind of the outlines of where the buildings used to be and all sorts. It's all part of the process, So there's kind of a component of research as well, but a lot of it is talking to people and just kind of feeling the vibe of a place.
Yeah, again, opening yourself up to the universe.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Did he tell you the story about these 2 houses, these 2 rundown houses in Parnell? Why did they not get upgraded?
It's hard to say, man. Like I went back there, so one of them's definitely a bit more like, it's literally like the windows are like boarded up and stuff. But then the other one, it's just a little bit more. There's people living in it. Like I could see some lights on. I don't know if he had ever been in those houses, but because the road it was like a little cul-de-sac, and the road used to go all the way down, but they'd like kind of split the road up to stop the through traffic coming through. So I think he said that Murray said that he used to live around there back in the day, and I think they all used to kind of be like that. And so these are pretty much the last of a species,
generation.
Yeah, last of a generation. And it is interesting because these old houses, they're so ornate, they're so beautiful. A lot of them are built from what they call kauri tree, which is a native New Zealand tree, which basically ran the economy of New Zealand for many years. It was very straight, strong wood that they used in a lot of shipbuilding and stuff. But half of Auckland was built from these kauri trees. But today we're in the scenario where we have this disease that's affecting a lot of these trees, which there's only about 1% of them left, called kauri dieback. And they're actually quite what you'd call like chiefly trees. Like they've got a lot of kind of energy and mana in Maori culture and in New Zealand more generally. And so there's this really interesting thing where these houses are basically built from the kind of the skeleton or the remains of these kind of chiefly trees that you can't really find anymore. And they're actually an endangered tree. If the disease takes hold, it kills the tree. And so there's some massive efforts to try and reduce that, the impact of that. But a lot of it's locked up in these buildings. So you can put a layer of paint on it, you can kind of do it up, but ultimately, if you buy that house, if you live in that house, you're part of the narrative of it, and the house will outlive you, just as outlive the people who built it. And so it's kind of getting into these layers, literally the grain of history when you look at these places.
Wow. Yeah. It sounds like you had such a great time.
Yeah, man. It was really good, and I'm glad I did it. It kind of just got the wheels turning, going to a new place, and just kind of being exposed to something a bit different. So even within a small place like New Zealand, going to a different city, it kind of gets the juices flowing, if you know what I mean.
That's interesting, because you'd think that, like you said, it's such a small place as New Zealand, maybe all of the cities would be similar. But, visiting Wellington, I noticed that it's got such a vibrant, young, kind of arty scene, kind of a bit weird and quirky and wonderful. And I wonder, is Auckland a bit more stiff upper lip, sort of like...
Yeah, man, it's interesting. So... because my family, obviously from the Hawke's Bay, but I do have a connection with Wellington, and I feel like it's kind of been in a way left behind. There's just there's no real room for growth here, just economically speaking. But all of that aside, the kind of this culture, this kind of youth culture, it's always kind of been here. And really, there's nothing else to do, and so it just emerges. And there's this really beautiful art scene, it's kind of fostered here. Whereas Auckland, it is a lot more commercial for sure, man. Like as I said, it's basically Hong Kong, and it's really weird because it's so different. It doesn't feel like any other place that I know in the country. And even going down south, being in the South Island, different parts of the country, they all kind of tend to have these kind of same sort of vibes. But Auckland in particular has this this own thing going. But part of that's really exciting as well, because there's so much happening. It is an international city, and right now it's the America's Cup, and it's fucking weird, man, because I don't know how much those boats cost, but they're sailing yachts, man, like on hydrofoils, and that's literally happening in Auckland. And I was walking around there, in the Wynyard Quarter and on the waterfront, and I'm just kind of floating around, and I'm like, man, I'm this proletarian guy just sort of mingling on the waterfront, and these guys are like, yeah, here's my boat, here's my super yacht, and they brought in I think it's Prada or whatever. They brought in all these people to talk to the people. So they've got all these people, these American accents, sort of talking to the other visitors. I don't know how they got through quarantine, man. Isn't there supposed to be a COVID thing going on? How did these people even get here? Did they just come in on their boat? I don't know. But it was cool, man, because it's they're lifting the boat out and cleaning it and stuff, and I was like, man, this is money, this is rich. And I'm sitting there, I'm taking a photo,
gosh.
It was just, it's a different vibe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially to the kind of dirty, weird sort of Wellington, which is really charming. I loved Wellington a lot.
Dirty, man. That's the word. Yeah. No. Well, it's a bit more familiar,
yeah.
It's got this kind of artistic thing going on, and you do get that in different places. But I mean, for me, it's always just, I'm fascinated by everything, man. It just blows my mind, But yeah, so that was my little Auckland adventure.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's great. I'm really glad you had such a good time. You've been traveling a lot recently. You've been traveling all around.
I've been lucky. I was down south in Blenheim the other week, and just sort of been keeping moving, man. I don't know. It just seems to happen. Every sort of couple of weeks, I'm going somewhere. But how about you? What have you been up to?
Been really busy, man. Yeah. I've got a lot of stuff done recently. This move back to England has been pretty good for me creatively.
Yeah.
So I just finished up January. So
congratulations!
The last loop, thank you. That was good. It was really great to be in this process of creating every day. It really pushed me to sort of test a lot of new ideas that that I hadn't really tested before with my music. There's quite a few loops in the January series that are really not my style. So the January series is finished, and I developed 4 of them. into the new episode of Soundscapes Radio. So Soundscapes Radio episode 16 is coming this Friday. It's up on YouTube on Friday.
Oh, wow.
It's available on Patreon now. And what I did is I took 4 of the loops from the January series, 4 of the loops that got the most likes or the most comments, or, you know, people said this one's great, whatever. I developed 4 of those into longer pieces.
Yeah.
Quite much longer pieces. And so that's coming on Friday. I'm also working on another idea that I've had kicking around for a while, and that's kind of like a sample pack idea. So what I want to do is I want to go back to previous episodes of Soundscapes Radio and take little loops, little drones, little ambient soundscapes, and put them into one album that people can sort of access and download. So musicians, for example, or filmmakers can download this album and then use it in their own music or their own video productions or their own something like this. I think there's I want to kind of share some of the stuff that I've been creating to other creators. I really think that's a powerful connection there that I can make. I'm not going to give away everything, of course. I'm going to handpick the sort of stuff that I think is useful. But I really like this idea. I use sample packs myself quite a lot in my own music. So I download sample packs from other artists who have made their work available. And I find they're really good creation tools. I find they're really good to start sort of the ball rolling. You know, I'll open up a sample pack, find something that I like, and then I'll build upon that. And sometimes, a lot of the time, I'll actually delete the original sample, but it was such a good starting point for me, and I really want to offer that to people. So I'm working on that at the moment. And also, third thing is cassette and vinyl. We talk about this a lot.
Yes.
And you sent me a fantastic link for a vinyl distributor, so thank you for that. But after our first chat, quite a few people reached out to me and said they'd be interested in buying some cassette, which I was really surprised about. Quite a few people said cassette, so I'm gonna do both cassette and vinyl.
That's beautiful, man. No, just to respond to that, man, like so 2 things. So you mentioned the sample stuff, and again, like coming back to this idea of the passion, right? Like I was staying at my friend Matt's place in Auckland on Wellesley Street, and I only got to spend sort of the first day and the last day with him because he was traveling the rest of the time. But we started chatting, and he's an architect. He's fucking super talented. He's done all of this stuff. He's built all these houses, and we're just talking about sort of his work and his practice. And he's a really just energetic guy. I really love hanging out with him. And we were talking about kind of the energy, right, and the positive energy, which is sort of my kind of thing, right? But sometimes, it's easy to forget. And we're just talking about the work and this idea that, you just got to put it out there, right? And you've got, all these ideas, and you can, your mind is this kind of idea generation machine, and you can't get too precious about it. You kind of have to put it out there. Obviously be smart about how you do it. But, I think with something like, as you said, the sample packs or some sort of work that can kind of, almost sort of germinate the ideas in other people, sort of you're giving back to the community, right? That sort of generosity theme, which you mentioned. I think that's really important. And, being able to offer that and allow that to happen, it can kind of almost have a two-way effect, because it comes back to you and it also goes to other people. So I definitely think it's an interesting thing to look at. And you do have to be, I think, a bit careful that you don't wholesale it yourself.
Sure.
As in just sort of, just throw it out there and it just kind of goes into the ether. I think being smart about it and offering it in such a way that it can enable people, enough to kind of bootstrap their own thing without becoming just sort of a noise or, not that, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so there is sort of a fine space. And I think we're sort of, maturing into this, and I think there is ways of doing that. And I think, having it on your site, having it where people come to you to find it, and they can look for it and use it, but then they can go and extend upon it. And I think that can be quite powerful. I
think so. Yeah. And I think there's 2 trains of thought here. one thing that I think about quite often is trying to retain some of the magic of creation.
Yeah.
You know, when I create my soundscapes, I do want there to be some kind of mysticism or some magical sort of, you know, where people listen to it and they're like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
You know, I want people to ask questions like, how did he make that sound? Or where did that come from? Or something like this, because this piques interest, hopefully.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, going down the sample pack route, it sort of, it can remove some of that mysticism, but as long as I don't do it too much, as long as I don't share too many of my sort of secrets, my you know, my little tools. But this also makes me start to think whether I should maybe do a few little tutorials or something like that, just about, you know, how I generate my sound or how I create my sound, or where do I start, where do I begin, something like that. Again, not going too far because I don't want to remove some of the magic, but a little bit just to sort of give back to the community, as you were saying.
I think my thoughts around that are, generally speaking, I think for tutorials and that sort of thing, generally if someone comes to you, then you can kind of, how would you say, you know, there's an opportunity to instruct and to provide leadership to somebody on an individual level. I think the trouble with a lot of tutorial stuff is it's so broad that it almost becomes sort of generic. And so what I would prefer to do, which is to say, look, you know, there's an individual who I've identified who I think is, you know, really talented in some space, and it might not even be something creative. It might be just more, you know, anything really. Working with that individual to, I guess, mentor and enable their work, you know, on a one-to-one basis, which, you know, and then basically someone has to find you, because I think by putting it out there and making it too easy to access, you know, it's quite a low-hanging fruit. And so, you know, my life has been changed many times by spending just you know, an evening, you know, with somebody and learning from them, you know, spending that night with you, doing that collaboration together, that sort of thing. And that, it's a little bit more obviously, you know, involved, but it allows you to get into the nitty gritty, which if you're doing something that's kind of free to ear, it almost, you can't really do that, and you can't respond off who the student is or who the other person is that you're working with. And so there is that kind of balance. And I think that's where something like, you know, the university environment where you're, you know, you're working with a small group of students or something, and you can kind of work with them and really kind of tease out the talent that they have within them and respond to that, as opposed to this kind of boilerplate textbook, which, you know, works for economics maybe, but not for something like creativity, where it's like you have to find that energy, you know. So I think there is a middle ground, and obviously it all kind of connects together. But it's like, man, if someone's really interested, it's like, yeah, if you're around, we'll go take some photos, you know, and I'll show you what to do. But you know, that's not necessarily something that is going to be so valuable if I just throw it up. And I don't even know how I would sort of explain it, you know.
No, but I really understand what you're saying. I really resonate with that. And in research for, you know, I wanted to look at some other Patreon accounts to see how I can develop mine and see things that other musicians and other artists are offering, and sort of use that to, you know, give me some ideas of stuff that I can try. I found a couple of musicians who are doing exactly what you say, like one-on-one mentoring, and you know, it's quite a high price Patreon tier, but you sort of have this one-on-one connection with the musician, and I really like that. I think that it's a great thing to do, to feed back and give, you know, give help to one person directly is a lot better than, as you say, just chucking it out there on YouTube, and seeing who grabs it.
And I mean, I think that, I mean, keeping it real, you know, like I think that is, you know, something that we, you know, is tough, you know, as a creative, and you know, in this world we live in, you know, it's like, how do you bring that value to it? And I think what I have realized is it is those, you know, interpersonal experiences which are really valuable, and they kind of rub off on me as well. And, you know, even these experiences I had in Auckland, you know, there's these kind of human experiences, you know, I'm integrating that into my life now, you know. Basically, you know, because there was a few other people who I met with who were really inspiring, and where I was able to talk to them, and basically that's now with me. And so I can then take that and give that to other people, right? Whereas trying to, I guess, explain that out of context can be really, really challenging. Not that it's not possible, but I think it is a challenge. And I think that sort of talks to, again, the need for places like universities and higher learning for this kind of mentorship. And in fact, my friend Matt, who I was staying with, he actually teaches at the university architecture school. And, he's, because I've met a couple of his master's students actually. And, it's quite small groups of people, like I think maybe no more than 10 people in a class. And so, working through, many years to get through an architecture degree, really, pulling out, starting in the first year where, you're kind of a white blood cell, there's not really any form or structure to what you do, towards, your fourth year, your final year, where you have this conception of who you are, as an architect. And it takes, years to get to that point, and you're working on that every day of the week, So in that sense, I think you can kind of lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? And so I think having the content up there is great, but I think the person can come to you, the person can say, hey, this is, I'm really interested in what you're doing. And you can kind of have that dialogue, and it's never something you can necessarily formalize either, like a curriculum or something that it kind of lets, people slip through the cracks. I don't know about you, man, but I was pretty hopeless at school. I slipped through the cracks, on purpose, but, you know what I mean? Whereas I think if you're in an environment where it's like, it's responding to you, smaller groups, that sort of thing. But yeah, man, so that's that. And it's snowing right at the moment for you?
It is, yeah. We had really big snowfall yesterday. The roads are all covered, and it's been a while since it's been like this. So it's quite fun.
Oh man,
yeah.
So you're stuck inside, or?
I am. I mean, we're still in the middle of lockdown 3, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting.
I know it's absolutely crazy, but so I was already stuck indoors anyway, and this just sort of makes it look a little bit prettier outside.
Yeah, no, that's all good, man. So.
I wanted to ask you, you texted me recently, and you were on a 2 a.m. walk around Wellington, I think it was a few weeks ago.
That's right.
And I was just wondering, have you ever thought about maybe doing sort of a longer walk, maybe over a week or over 2 weeks, or something a bit more substantial? Yeah, I mean, I do like to kind of come home, or go back to a bed of some sort and sleep. So I think a pilgrimage of some sort is on the books for some point. In fact, I had a email come in today for this art residency in Iran, which I'm going to apply for. I applied for it last year, but I didn't get in, but I'd love to go to Iran. It's good luck with that. That's great.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by Persian architecture and that whole thing. And it would just be like, the right time to do it, So, I mean, you know what I mean? So I just got to, and that would be a pilgrimage, So I'm keen to do that. But in terms of walking for a week, I've thought about it. I think the process I have is I kind of like to stay in a place, go and then come back to that place and then move it to a different place. So it's sort of, that's tended to work for me. It worked in Bangkok. It's worked in other places. So tending to move place and then kind of fan out from each place. Though I think if I was on a subject or a project that was a little bit more, if it was a little bit more of a tight subject where, I kind of knew where it was going, I think it could be sort of one after the other and you just keep going, walking from one to the other. I love the idea of like carrying everything on your back though. Like living light, having it minimalist. That's a big part of what I do is like keeping it minimal, because I think it is easy to kind of hoard shit, and so kind of keeping it, keep it lightweight, carry it on your back. And definitely, man, I think that is something I'd like to do one day.
Yeah, so I guess what you're saying is that you like to have sort of checkpoints where you can come back home after a walk, after a 2 a.m. walk in the morning, and you can debrief and sort of make notes or back up your files, things like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. I think having that sort of downtime, though I would be open to something a little bit more substantial. I had planned before all of this stuff happened to do a bit more of an overland trip through Asia, and involving trains and things where it would be sort of a journey as such. And I still kind of have that in the planning, but I think there is a bit more preparation I need to do. So in a way, I kind of wasn't ready for it. So I'm I am interested to see how that would plan out, and maybe having some rough plans. Which reminds me, I've just finished reading like On the Road, which is like classic, beat fiction, and I love sort of the way the character Sal, he's sort of like going from place to place, but he's not really, there's no plan, there's no sort of directive, he just sort of goes, and that's sort of aimless in a way, and I mean it's very beatnik, but I like that. I don't like the idea of planning it too much. You know what I mean? So you've got this kind of general direction, west, right, and let's just go. And I think we've kind of forgotten how to do that, and
just to wander.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit basic, but that's kind of this classic skill that I'm trying to foster. It's sort of a cottage industry, but people don't do it anymore. And as I said, many times before, I like to turn my phone off. I like to get lost. I got a little bit. I did some big walks in Auckland, man. Like I went down Dominion Road, which is like the old main street before they built the highway, sort of thing. And there's kind of all these little, there's like suburbs, and then like little clusters of buildings, and then more suburb. And I walked all the way down that for hours, and then all the way back. It was nice, man. It's very meditative, and I actually had this really interesting experience, which if I can share with you,
please.
I was walking through, I want to say probably a couple of kilometers sort of south down Dominion Road, and I ended up in this Chinatown, which I had actually been at like a couple of days previously with my friend Alan, and we had these noodles at this place, and they were so good. But I went back there. I came through that place sort of in the evening because I sort of was zigzagging through sort of some of the side streets, and I came back through there, and it was like, holy shit, man! It was again like I had just like derived into this fucking Shanghai place, man. Like it was just, I mean, because it's Chinatown, but it was just like this little couple of buildings, but they had these like flashing red LED lights. And I've seen the exact same lights before in Shanghai, which really inspired that kind of red color scheme, which went on to define the series. And just for a moment there, because I was a little bit dehydrated, a little bit tired. I'd been shooting all night. It was late, and I just had this kind of moment where I felt this kind of lightness in my head, this kind of levitation. And just for a moment, I sort of like transported in my memories back to that kind of the footsteps I was taking in Shanghai in the streets, nice. In Jing'an, and I was like, holy shit, and I just sort of surfed on that memory for just a minute, and I sort of let it take me. And I was like, man, that's it. That's what I came for. That's the connection. That's the derive. That's the spark there, and all it took was that kind of bright red LED to just sort of phase me and get me into it. And I was like, man, that's it. And then I just walk on, and then I leave it behind, and it's like just sort of like fade out, fade in, fade out. And it was so beautiful, man. Like I don't know if that really makes sense, but
no, it does. And it's so it's interesting how powerful our senses are for memory. Smell is super powerful. You can smell something you smelled like 20 years ago, and it will instantly bring you back.
Well, because also like on Sunday night, my last night in Auckland, so I did this big wander around Parnell, these old houses, and then I went down to there's sort of a little bit of an industrial area around there, and I went back through and up some streets, and there was this like one like yakitori place, and it was like closed. It was like real late at night, and it closed, but I could still smell like this, it was coming out like the vents, and I was like, holy shit,
This is Japan.
This is it, man. This is like, and I just sort of like lapped it up, and I was just like, I don't know. I was wondering, maybe in like a previous life, I was wondering, have I, like, quite literally, I was like, man, have I been commanded to just walk the earth? Like to feel this stuff, to see this stuff, because there's no one else around, man. I'm just like, that's a moment, So that's like the smell, and then obviously sound, like you listen to an old song.
Absolutely. Takes you right back. But when I was living in Tokyo and working at the coffee roastery, I used to cycle to work every morning.
Yeah.
And I cycled past this area in Tokyo that was just full of factories, basically. And there was sort of recycling factories, and they were making all sorts of stuff in these huge buildings. And I cycled past one, and there was a smell emanating from inside. It was really strong, like, I don't know, like plastic burning or something like that. I'm not sure what they were doing in there, but it instantly took me back to my art classroom in primary school.
Yeah.
Like the smell of something coming from that factory just took me back about 25 years, and I was sitting in art classroom at school. It was crazy how much that happened.
Oh man, it is incredible, and I think in a way we do. It's easy to turn that off and to forget about that, and in this digital connected world, to forget about these connections between things, and that's what I'm all about. Is like, especially with visual stuff, it's like, man, just use your eyes, look, see, let it kind of float into your brain, and remember what used to be there, and it's what I do when I walk these streets. I see these old colonial houses from 1895. I'm like, man, fuck this. If I just squint, I'm back there, I'm talking with these people, I'm back in the old days. I run my hand along this like brick building. I'm like, man, someone else was here before me and they're gone, decades ago. And that kind of idea of like walking the streets and like kind of following in the footsteps of other people who had been, and then there's people who are yet to be, who are kind of going to come after, and they'll be like, oh, who used to be here?
Yeah.
And it's this kind of big, massive thing. And it's like, when you zoom out, it's like, man, that's such an inspiration for me. It's like, it's 4-dimensional, basically, Yeah.
Can we talk a bit more about your inspirations? Actually, you mentioned earlier On the Road, which is obviously quite inspirational for you in its subject matter. But like going back, maybe, I don't know, 15 years or something, where did all this begin? What are you super inspired by?
I had an interesting thing. Probably about a year ago, I was back in my hometown, and I used to live in this house on Tollymash Road, this old fucking farmhouse thing, and it was just sort of middle of nowhere. You could hear sort of the cicadas and the owls and stuff at night. And I remember I carved my girlfriend's name into a power pole. They have these wooden power poles with these like strips of aluminium to stop the possums climbing up and getting into the wires. And I remember at that time I carved her name into the thing, and that was probably 15 years ago, right? And back in school, and I went back there and I was like trying to see if it was still there, just to see if I could connect and
rekindle that.
Oh no, I mean, she, bless her soul, that she's obviously I'm in a different relationship now, but at that time, I mean, she was quite an inspiration for me actually. But anyway, that's a different topic. But I was thinking, like, how can I connect? Because Cody, young Cody used to be here. And now I'm coming in. It's like this time travel thing, and I was like, man, I wonder if he left something for me, this kind of like Inception. What is it? Tenant. Have I left some shit in here for the future? And I was like, okay. But then I went there, and I was quite disappointed. I think a car had crashed into the pole, and so they put in a concrete one, so it was gone.
Mate, that's where it all began.
That's where it all began.
Carving your girlfriend's name.
Yeah, it was about a kilometre down the road, because it was this long fucking country roads they have, and it's just surrounded by like orchards and farmland and stuff. And I think I might have used to just go for walks around there. Like, that's why I happened to have carved the name in there, because there was nowhere else to go, nothing to do. And there was these little like irrigation ditches that connected all the farms together. And I remember I used to kind of like go and like wander through those. I mean, so, we're getting into the old days here, but these old, these old trenches, and I used to walk through them sort of late at night, and just kind of sneaking around in these like in this farmland. And that was sort of like, my childhood. So I look now at, the sort of the globalization we have, where everyone's connected with smartphones and, in the machine. I was like, man, back when I was in school, we used to wander around orchards and farms.
Just walk.
We used to just walk, and I know it sounds a bit silly, but it's like, it's on the road, man. It's like, it's what they did as well. It's like, it's all you can do. And I really enjoyed that book. I thought the first half was, the first couple of parts were really good. And then it keeps going.
Tailed off.
Yeah, tailed off. But definitely the first part of On the Road was like, that's classic,
really touched you.
Yeah. So there's, I mean, in terms of inspiration, man, there's heaps of stuff goes into it. And we have talked a little bit about this before, but I think at a high level, it's like, man, how far back do you go? I have this sneaking suspicion that maybe in a previous life or something, I was banished to be a wanderer. I don't know, like...
right, wow.
Well, yeah. I got another story for you. So I was walking through... I went all the way down Dominion Road in Auckland, and I ended up in... I went past Grey Lynn, and I ended up in Arch Hill, which is this little, like, reserve thing alongside the motorway. And it was super dark, man, like, pitch black. And I was like, okay, I'll just keep going. And I went into the little forest, and I just sort of let the darkness, because it's, I'm out there at nighttime photographing stuff and shooting and wandering. And I was like, man, this is my natural environment. I know that sounds a bit woo-woo, but like, I let the darkness kind of like invite me in, and you see things in the shadows, and in the leaves, and there's a little bit of like tungsten light shining through the leaves, sort of illuminating something. And you hear, and there's a lot of, life. There's a lot of creatures and possums and things running around. So it has this kind of like noise and texture to it. It's not completely still, and in a way that's quite familiar, because I think if it was completely quiet, it would be kind of unreal. And so I went into the darkness. I was like, and then I walked through that for some time. I couldn't tell you how long, but by the time I got out the other side, it was like I felt like a changed person. Like I literally had kind of gone into the darkness and then out into the other side. And then I was like, yeah, that's kind of what I needed to do. And in a way, I don't think a normal person would have done that. You know what I mean? I think they would have gone.
Well, they probably would have ran away, yeah.
I think a normal person would have taken the light, And I was like, okay, that was kind of what I do. And in a way, it was like, that's the wanderer kind of coming out. It was beckoning me to go in. And I do write about this a lot. But, to just kind of see what's in there. So, yeah, I mean, to answer the question, when did it start, man? I don't fucking know.
It started in a previous life.
Yeah, a previous life.
No, that's really interesting. So you think you were exiled or something from some community? Or...
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just joking now, but like, I potentially, it was quite highfalutin, but I've never really felt completely connected to a place. I've always felt like, as that kind of wandering the desert for 40 days kind of things, like I've always kind of felt that in what I do. And in a way, that's what drove me to, as we talked about previously, drove me to go to Japan and different places, is to kind of just go and see and know, but yeah. And so we have some other topics here. So we've got Atomic Habits. Tell me about that, man.
Yeah, so recently I've just started reading James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
And I'm not a huge way through the book, but basically what he's saying or what he's proposing is that tiny improvements to your life or your work every day will add up and compound into something amazing, right? Yeah. So, when I first started Soundscapes Radio, for example, it wasn't great, maybe. It could have been better. The recordings could have been better. My mastering was really bad. My mixing was really bad. So, going back to those days, and then just every time I compose a new piece for Soundscapes Radio, I just have to get a little bit better, right? And if I just get a little bit better each time, this will eventually compound into making it something good, right? And maybe I'm still on that journey. Maybe Soundscapes Radio is not where it will be one day. But I really resonate with this idea of small changes often rather than big changes, rarely.
Okay, so I got some feedback for you and James Clear.
Yes.
So I think, number one, I think Soundscapes, since the beginning, it was always what it was. And I happen to really love the first couple of episodes. I listened to them, and they really, seriously, they mean a lot to me because, you were doing it, I was listening.
Ascension.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, the first few episodes in particular, because I knew that was like the genesis of a new thing. And for all of its technical faults, which I don't really notice myself. I mean, maybe as a sound engineer, someone might pick up on the mastering, but in my opinion, that stuff doesn't really matter. It's part of it, If you were to produce perfectly mastered shit from day one, it'll almost be like, what is this? And so there's that certain sense of kind of work in progress, which is absolutely critical, man. Like, early work always has that, and it's what makes it what it is,
Yeah.
So I don't think that's a major. I mean, there's technical stuff. It's good to mask, to get it right, but generally,
sure.
If you're in the ballpark, it's all good. And we're at the point now where, in terms of quality and stuff, it's, we're not recording onto wax cylinders, man. Like we've got, it's all good. But in terms of like the big change and the little change, I think it will always be what it wants to be. And if you try to make it into what it's not, then you're trying in the wrong way. And what I mean by that is, like, if you have like a life-changing event, that's going to change your music or your creative practice in a big way. And that's happened to me on a number of occasions. I'm sure it's happened to you, but it's never going to be like A, B, C, D. And it's really hard because when you try to explain to people who you are, and you're like, well, I'm the guy who did A, B, C, D. And it's like, that looks really good on a CV or in a proposal or something. But reality is, it's like, I was down and out, and then I was this, and then I was that. But that's your life, that's what you get, that's the fucking thing you get when you put the coin in the machine. You know what I mean? So I think trying to like make it too procedural actually can be a negative, and it comes out in the work. So a little bit of chaos, in there is all good. And as long as you got the technical right. So again, this is where it's like the creative and the process, like, having a good creative process is cool. And, producing daily and those sort of things, which is maybe what James Clear is talking about, having kind of, daily rituals, but not letting the rituals kind of impact and stifle the work. Go out and just be like, fuck, man, let's just go do something different, throw it all out there. But, in a way, your core work will come through. And I was having this discussion with somebody, and we were talking about archetypes. Do you, for yourself, Simon, do you feel like you've got like an archetype for who you are? Does that even mean anything to you?
I mean, it's something that I'm thinking a lot about recently, like, who am I?
Who are you?
It's sort of, I look at other people and I'm like, okay, yeah, I understand who they are, and I understand, right? But when I look at myself, I'm like, okay, right, I've got a few different things going on. I've got quite a lot of passions and things that I really enjoy. What makes me me? So no, I haven't. I'm still answering that question.
It's the journey, bro. So that and again, man, like, there's some woo-woo stuff there, but I think there's a lot of connection with people and human beings. But with your work, coming back, so like, for myself, it's like, okay, maybe I am this like wanderer thing. It literally comes to me in my dreams. It comes to me in everything I do. I couldn't not do that thing. And for yourself, think about what it is you do. What do you do in your dreams? What draws you to create? And if you can kind of like start uncovering that, and it's a lifelong journey, but if you can start uncovering that, it will kind of give you answers, and it will direct you in the right direction. And there's technical things you can do. So there's kind of like, quote unquote life hacks that can improve your process, which is, maybe the atomic habits. But I think you do need to have you need to start thinking about, not necessarily you, but, generally speaking, it is good to think about kind of what your motivations are and what your values and driving forces are, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And the more I think about that, and embrace that, it's like, there's certain things that I can do. And if I do those things, then it enables the work. And if I didn't do them, it stifles the work. And so kind of uncovering those kind of has like a much stronger effect than, optimizing my photo process or some kind of technical aspect of my work, which I think is semi-loose, but it's loose enough to allow creative freedom, but it's tight enough to deliver the goods, So that's sort of my response to that.
I like that feedback, but just to go back and to be fair to James, I don't think he's necessarily saying make a ritual or make a habit of sort of don't focus too much on the process of becoming better. I think what he's saying is just keep creating, keep doing what you're doing every day, but just have small reflection sections and see where you can improve and make it better. And it's what quite a few of other people are saying. I watched Joe Rogan yesterday, and Joe Rogan, love him or hate him, he's a very controversial figure. But if you look at his very first podcasts, they were awful, like absolutely. And he says this himself. It's not just me saying that. He says that, and he just kept going and kept creating, and he just he explains it like he's training his creative muscle by creating. Right?
Oh yeah, man.
You don't get hung up on how good or bad it is, or just keep doing it, reflect a little bit, get better every day. And then look at him now. He's just sold to Spotify for what is it, $100 million or something?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, yeah. I think you got to keep going, bro. Like,
just keep going.
Yeah. So again, James Clear. We'll I probably should read the book before, but I'm not saying it's not it's not right for sure. But I think because I do believe in that like procedural improvements. But I think having these tools at your disposal is they're all different kind of tools in your tool set, and this is one of them that allows you to kind of sharpen it. And I think not giving up is a big one as well, and that is probably like the biggest one, man, because it's like even if it kind of sucks, if you keep going it will eventually get better, but if you stop it just goes to zero, right?
And it's too easy to give up during that phase where you're growing, but it's not taking off like you thought it would. There's a very big part there where you're tempted to give up, but you just got to keep going, keep pushing. Yeah,
and interestingly, that's a really good time to reflect on the values thing, though, because interestingly, the reason I even went to Auckland, man, was to talk to a couple of these galleries, and none of them wanted to know about my work, man. Like, it was funny because I had all these other great experiences, but the galleries were like, oh yeah, that's a bit, and I mean that's totally cool, man, because I know and I believe, that it's like, it's for 99%, it's not going to be the thing, it's too much, it's too real, it's too dark, it's showing them something. But for the other, the others, for the people who follow the work and enjoy it, it's what it's what they want to see, and that's the kind of thing. I don't want to build it. I can't change it because I'd be changing who I am and what I do. And so it's like, don't give up, man. Like, and that's kind of what we started this call with, this talk, with the passion, because I've kind of boiled it down to those like 3 Ps, man. I know it sounds a bit basic, but the people, the place, and the passion. Like, if you can get those 3 things to happen, I should write a book about that. Maybe not, but
you should.
I got another book I got to write before that, but as you know, but I think with the 3 Ps, man, like you get that stuff out there, and it will come. And if it doesn't come, at least you're going to have a good time. If you know what I mean. Like, honestly, as long as you have a good time, it's all good.
Yeah, but you've got to find out your reason for doing work. Like, I think that's really important on what you just said. Like, if you don't have a reason to do work or your drive to do your work, then when you get pushed back by these galleries, that might affect your self-esteem or something like that. But what's great is that the galleries weren't interested in your work, but you're like, you know what, I don't care, I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah, man, it was interesting because I was literally, I mean, I shouldn't say too much, but I was in this place, and it's a fancy place, and I was like, okay, here's my stuff, and it's like, it's even I'm starting to like rubber duck, where it's like, the thing where you talk about, you give yourself the answer by talking to a rubber duck, which is something we're doing, with design all the time, but. I was literally talking to this curator, and I was like explaining all about my work, but I was explaining the reasons why it wasn't appropriate for this gallery, because it was this brutal concrete, grime-covered neon cities and stuff, and it's like, that doesn't fit. But in a way, I was like, that's all good though. And then after that, I went and hung out on the street, and then Murray came and picked me up, and we went for a drive, and
nice.
I was like, sorry, it's not right. And maybe we'll have a relationship with that place in the future. Who knows? I'm always open to working with people, but at the end of the day, man, like, it's all good. Not everyone's going to get it. And it made me think, I was like, well, shit, what am I doing? Because I'm not super interested I haven't ever been super interested in the commercial side. I've always been about, okay, can I create the story? Can I share something with the people? And now I'm just slowly beginning to think, okay, well, can we can we show more people? How can we develop this thing? But kind of why? Why do I want to do it that way? Is it for myself? Is it for the people? Whatever. And answering those questions, because those questions start to fall over if you don't really have an answer. Why do you want to have a show in this gallery? Well, it's like, well, I don't know. Then it's like, yeah, well, you're not, you're not going to have one. But if you're like, this is the place where this has to be because this is what the people need to see, or blah, blah, you've got a kind of a reason to trade, like a thing that draws the attention and I don't know, it gives it the vitality. And I've got another place actually off the back of all of that, which I got an email tonight actually, but they're probably, hopefully they're interested. And then that will be like, that's the place. And I have a feeling this other place will be the place where it needs to be, but we'll see. But yeah.
Good luck with that.
Thank you, man.
Yeah. Nice.
Sweet. Is that us, man?
I think so. Yeah. I think for today we've had a good chat.
We had a good chat, man. Yeah. I'm really glad to catch up with you. And I think I am keen to maybe get some more questions off our Patreons.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did enjoy it last time, answering questions. So please, if you want to send through some questions, please do.
Sweet.
Anytime.
Well, we'll leave it there, but it was great to talk, Simon. And
it was good. Let's catch up in a couple of weeks and check in.
See what's up. All right, man. Thank you very much.